Hi, I'm Mark. I go by Bear Like Lion online, and today is a very special day to me. It's officially been 1 year since the first Git commit of Surf's Up. If you haven't heard of Surf's Up, it's a free-to-play multiplayer recreation of Counter-Strike Surf written in the Godot game engine. Surf's Up is a very special project to me. It's my second release on Steam, my first 3D game, my first free-to-play game, and my first multiplayer live service title. This video is meant to be a retrospective on the first year and the history of the game's development. Let's start with some fun facts and stats. The game launched in 185 days. There's over 120,000 people who have put it into their Steam account, 60,000 unique players, about 4,000 wish lists, 1% of people have purchased, 40,000 runs have been completed since October. There's about 700 globally ranked supporters, 40,000 lines of code. The repository is a little over 22 gigs, and we spent about 2,000 hours working on the game in total. That's me, Nerdiful, and Krita. While I was working on my first game, Survival Skate, back in May of 24, I was facing some burnout and frustration dealing with issues I didn't know how to fix. I would get stuck on something and frustrated, so I figured I'd try to shift gears and work on something new. I tend to participate in a game jam or prototype some new idea, and after spending the last few months on a 2D roguelike, I really wanted to make something in 3D. Searching around GitHub, I found this first person starter project. I forked it and began hacking away. It was a great starting point, but I didn't really like the way the character controller felt, so I started searching through the Godot asset library and found Ratmara's Gold GDT character controller. It claimed to be a character controller for Godot that simulates movement in the Gold Source engine. Now, I love Source, Gold Source, and Quake. In the late 90s, I had just moved to a new town and I knew no one. The first friend I made was a boy named Enrique who asked if I played video games and if I had a PC. I told him yes, and the next day he brought me a burned CD with Half-Life scribbled in Sharpie on it. It also had a CD key written on the bottom, and that CD key ended up becoming my first Steam account. Valve's titles are the most played games on my Steam account. I had this new character controller. It claimed to be just like Gold Source. And I thought, surely, if it's a recreation, the bug that makes Surf exist needs to exist here, right? I found a 3D model of a surf map on Sketchfab, threw it into Godot, and all of a sudden I was surfing. About a year before, my buddy Captain Fizzy asked me if I'd ever surfed in Counter-Strike. I told him I love surf, and it became a nightly ritual for us to hop on a Discord call, stream something to watch, and play on a 24/7 Surf Utopia server. This lasted for a few months, but ultimately, when CS2 launched in September of 2023, it kind of died out between us. The moment I got my prototype of Counter Surf working, I sent him a DM asking him to give it a try. Feedback was good. I was feeling great. He mentioned one thing was missing: multiplayer. I found a YouTube tutorial by GWiz and managed to get multiplayer working in just a day. We gathered some friends in the Discord and played the first official test of the game. I recorded it and posted online. This is the video footage of what became of Surf's Up. It had felt amazing and incredible to play a game that I made with my friends. But ultimately, I ended up shelving the project and putting my focus back into finishing up Survival Skate. Afterwards, I started a new job. I was the lead developer of an e-commerce company, and I was getting super burnt out from stress and the workload. For a period of about 4 months, I had completely stopped programming on my own time for fun. This entire time, I couldn't get the thought of Surf meets Trackmania out of my head. I had some time off for the holidays. My incredible wife, Karina, suggested I return to game dev to try and spark some joy. She asked for me to make her a Christmas map in my surf game. I began working on the first iteration of what became Christmas. Development just took off. I was having a blast and began adding in more and more features. I decided to make this my second game. That was exactly 1 year ago today. I had officially begun production on what would become my second Steam release. I began showing the game off. I had a playable build on Edge. I was hopping around game developer discords like Solo Development and Godot, streaming my process. I felt like there was a huge barrier of entry for Surf. You had to download this big game, set up a dedicated server, open a port, configure that server, install plugins, download maps, or you could launch a 20-year-old game and play on a public server, hoping it's the map you want, or pick up an expensive private server to play on. I felt like there is a potential market for just a pick up and go surf game. This is the oldest build of Surf's Up I still have. It is from late January before we got on Steam. It has a fun bug where you can't actually full screen the game. Anytime you try, it just gets stuck. Let me change the window here. The sound button mutes the audio, but the settings button also just mutes the audio. Customize was here, where you could change your surfer color and trail. When you host game, you could select a map pool with difficulties being based on the color. Additionally, these are all AI art-generated placeholders from a custom Stable Diffusion model. You can see old T-Sky here. This is Boreas with the old starting platform. And as you see, I had removed all the map's geometry. This was because GitHub has a 100 megabyte file size limit, and I couldn't figure out how to optimize properly. So I ended up just stripping back all of the props. This led to some unintended skips, where you could just get right to the end zone, skipping the entire map. There's also some graphic settings like lens flare, pixelization, dithering, and color reduction. It wasn't quite working, but the thought was there. Make some really chunky pixels. I used this pixelization filter in a lot of the early marketing of the game, which kind of did us a disservice on how cool it could have looked. But overall, it was really fun to play with. I just love the pixely, crunchy aesthetic on Rainbow. This is the original version of the map Sunset. And even in this build, I had the checkpoint system in place. So you could respawn at specific areas to kind of progress through a map. I was a pretty bad surfer, so I needed checkpoints. And I also wasn't a great level designer, which led to a lot of skips like this. This was when I met Nerdiful on the Godot Cafe server. He tuned into my stream and asked, "Yo, is that Surf?" I went, "Sure is. You want to play together?" He was like, "Whoa, is it multiplayer?" We ended up surfing every single map in the prototype together for hours that night. This began a friendship of the two of us just hanging out, working on our own projects, but helping one another with any issues we may have had. After a couple weeks, he brought up that he really wanted to try and make his own map for the game. I thought about how he could. I talked it over with Karina, and in the first month of production, I gave him full access to our source code. It was now February. I had just discovered the surf tag on Twitch, and I began reaching out to streamers asking for them to try my prototype for feedback. Everyone was kind of sus about a new guy in chat asking them to download an exe. I decided to go ahead and drop the hundo for a Steam page. I was obsessively checking Steamworks to see if my game had been reviewed. Once you submit a game to Steam, you have to set up the store page and upload a build, and someone over at Valve checks it out and approves it. With Survivalscape, I had the leaderboard code already working with my initial build. Eventually, I saw this random Steam ID pop up on the score. I went and looked up the profile, and they had a Valve employee badge. Shortly after, the game was approved. With Surf's Up, I heard nothing for weeks. I began worrying that something was wrong, and I impatiently opened a support ticket with Steam, and they got back to me saying, "We're just busy working from home. We'll get to it soon." There's this unique metric in the back end of Steam for lifetime unique users. Once you submit your game, it sits at 1. Once Valve sees it, it bumps up to 2. I kept checking for my unique players to see if they've reviewed the game. Nothing. Nothing at all. But suddenly, 2. Someone saw it, but no response. I waited the whole day. I kept reviewing. Shortly after, 7 people had launched the game. I was approved for Steam. I like to think that Valve showed the game around internally to a few people because it was cool, not that there were any legal or technical reasons that multiple people had to look at it. I had a shiny new Steam page, and I went back to the surf streamers that I'd befriended, asking them to give my game a shot. I was immediately overwhelmed. Air strafing was broken, start and speed was broken. There was a technique where you could just spin around endlessly to get hundreds of thousands of units at the beginning. There were major skips on maps that I spent considerable time on, but it was exciting. People were playing the game, their friends were asking about the game. Overall, we peaked at about 700 players during this period. My suggestion for other game developers is to do an open playtest early. I feel like my game could have spread much further if there wasn't any barrier to get it. Playtests are a unique time in Steam where Steam doesn't market the game for you. You need to do all the marketing yourself, but it's a great time to capture people who are dedicated and willing to test features for your game. This is the Steam playtest build of the game. This was pretty early on in development, around February to March, when we first got onto Steam. You can see we now have this proper settings menu where you can adjust trail color and player color. We had video options with the pixelization and dithering and color reduction. This sub viewport is actually the current main menu scene that we repurposed. Had audio options, and we had basic key binding. We started to get some community maps in, which really helped improve the game. We also started working on some maps that never made it to the final product. I'd always liked this part on Akai. The playtest's world record, leaderboard still exists, which is really fun to go back and look at. By this time, I had also started to figure out how to better optimize and managed to get the geometry bought into Boreas, but the shading and lighting wasn't quite right. So surfing through these tunnels is kind of just like going through a white void. By the playtest, we had added in no clip, so players could kind of explore and look around the levels. This is the original Christmas map that kind of kickstarted the game's development. The playtest lasted till the end of March. I knew what the game was and what it needed, so I took the month of April, kicked everybody out, and locked in on the game. During the month of May, we went into a beta phase. I had requested 200 keys from Steam. I gave them out to people in the community that I met during the playtest period, and I began working on things like a new user interface, new maps, and most importantly, figuring out the business model. The business model is probably the most controversial thing about this game. It's really difficult to conceptualize, and I'd asked everybody for their feedback and feeling before I shipped it. Surf's Up is free to play. It has an optional supporter DLC you can pay $10 for. It's often on sale for 25% off. As a free player, you're limited to public and private solo lobbies. There's a daily rotation of maps to select, and maps rotate every day. As a supporter, you get access to friends only and hidden lobbies, all the maps, some cosmetics that aren't available on the market. And as a supporter, you can host any map for any player. Free players are allowed to play in your lobbies on maps outside of the rotation. The idea was that if one person in your friend group picked up the game, everyone in the friend group could enjoy the benefits of the purchase. I felt like this was a fair and reasonable model. It's a multiplayer focused game, so going free to play means there's a player base, but ultimately free as a demo, and I hope you support the game to fund future development. Another core part of the business model are the classic maps we ported into the game. One of the first things I did was create this process allowing me to take source engine BSPs and get them into Godot. It allowed me to compare side by side how Counter-Strike felt versus my game. I had posted a video to our skill surfing with our first big netcode test of about 24 people, and the user Grannis48 was kind enough to connect me with every original author for the maps I had ported. I ended up reaching out to each of them directly through DMs and asked their permission to use the map in the game. I let them know that the map would always be free and available to all players, and I offered them a key to test the game. Everybody responded positively, but only one of them asked for a key. Panzer, who's the creator of Utopia, joined us on Utopia and Surf's Up. He cleared the map on his first try, and it felt like the ultimate success. The creator of one of my most iconic maps felt at home on my recreation. He stuck around for another map and ended up sending me a paragraph of feedback and ideas. It's one of the biggest highlights of development for me. I had also tried to monetize the game by selling cosmetics on the Steam Marketplace. Players earn a drop anytime they complete a map or the level timer runs out. They're limited to one drop a day, and the idea was that if someone couldn't afford the game, they could get a lucky drop, sell that drop, and buy the DLC. Steam's Marketplace has been a financial failure. Most items sell for less than $1. I've earned less than $20 in 6 months, and going forward, I'm reconsidering integrating microtransactions instead. Although seeing the Steam market develop and the rarity kind of float around has been a lot of fun. It also gives players the opportunity to buy the specific cosmetics they're looking for pretty cheap. The reception to this business model has been mixed. Some people feel like I shouldn't be charging at all. Others didn't realize there was something to buy. Most people don't understand what supporter even is. People don't feel the need to buy because they get so much of the game for free. But ultimately, it allows for anyone to try the game, which increases our numbers, but having no monetary commitment. About 70% of people quit within the first 30 minutes and never return. But 20% of players are pretty hooked. There's this difference in mindset of gamers when they spend money on something versus play something for free. If they've spent money, they'll give it an honest try for the first 2 hours to see if they want to refund it. But being a free game, they've spent nothing, so they lose nothing when they give up. This retention metric was the driving force behind more onboarding and guided surf in the version 1.3 update. At the end of May, I revoked all the beta keys and focused on polishing up the demo for Next Fest. Steam's Next Fest is the most important event when marketing your indie game. It happens 3 times a year in February, June, and October, and Steam's front page becomes filled with new demos for people to try. Content creators also dive deep to uncover new hidden gems in games. In my opinion, Next Fest should be the last step before launch. This is your big marketing push to secure day one sales, and you only get one shot at it. Scour Twitch, find streamers doing coverage, pitch them your game, and market the heck out of it. In an attempt to get the most coverage we could, I decided to spend $100 on ads from my platform of choice, which is Reddit. It was a lot of work and only had little return. We had 230,000 impressions, about 1,000 clicks, but little to no conversions. Only 5 people ended up claiming the demo, so I just paid $20 a user. But our Next Fest was incredible. I did some research beforehand and learned that only the first 2 days really count. After Tuesday, most people are done digging through the store, and it takes until Friday until players pick up. I had taken the first 2 days of Next Fest off from work, and I planned on marketing the demo as much as I could. I spent the day joining public lobbies, introducing myself as the developer over voice chat. I tried to stay around for one map, answer any questions, and then move on to the next lobby. The community was growing, hundreds of people were joining the Discord every day. It felt amazing. This is the Steam Next Fest demo of Surf's Up. We had the map rotation built in. Maps were rated based on their difficulty. Unfortunately, I'm not able to actually boot into this mode because the demo is disabled intentionally to prevent anyone from playing it after the fact. But you can see we got far more players on the leaderboard here. Utopia having almost over 200 clears, which is the max cap for Steam. We had the customize, and you could rotate the player. We had a new settings menu. I was eagerly anticipating the launch of the game and was super excited with all the progress we had made. In an effort to stress test the netcode, we decided on hosting 250 player count lobbies every night at 8 p.m. This was when the maps rotated. We would play for an hour, and then we'd shut down. When Friday rolled around, we patched the game to unlock all cosmetics and maps for everybody. It was the first time I felt the game come to life, seeing all the different unique character models. It felt incredible. With Next Fest ending, it was time to shut down the demo and prepare for launch, which was only a few weeks away. The game was just about done and ready for launch. I started giving out full access to anyone in the Discord who asked for it. I began polishing up the UI. We did some overhaul and small bug fixes. I kept telling people that I had to take the game away at some point, that I had to wipe the scores before 1.0. I told them it'd be 2 weeks out. They asked for more time. Said it'd be 1 week out. Then it was the weekend before. Now it's the night of launch, and I never took it away. Fran and I were too excited to sleep. We decided to go live on Twitch and press the green button in front of everybody. It was around 3 a.m. on July 7th, and we were live. It felt incredible. We played and streamed with the community for about 2 hours, and it became our biggest sales day to date. Surf's Up was out, the community was growing, and people can now financially support the development of the game. A few days after launch, an article about the game was posted to Automaton Japan. It got over 100,000 views and gave us this massive overseas player base, but I ultimately failed to capitalize on it by not translating the game. After launch, I joined a public lobby, and a user informed me that there was a hacking forum discussing how to get my DLC for free. They were kind enough to share the link with me over Discord, and I got to read through the thread and figure out exactly how they were using this exploit. I ended up writing a custom DRM check to verify ownership in Steam's backend. It was the end of July, we were in Steam's Racing Festival, fixing some bugs, and preparing our first major update. At the end of August, we launched version 1.1, updating Godot Steam's multiplayer peer, adjusting the start speed to be closer to CS, and adding 8 new maps. Godot is great. It's this tiny and mighty open source engine that I love. One of the coolest things about Godot is if the engine doesn't do something natively, you can just add it. Steam and Steam's multiplayer peer are 2 features I've added into my build of Godot, thanks to the Godot Steam module. Multiplayer is amazing, but it's also super complex. In Surf's Up, we use Godot's networking through Steam's networking. When it works, it's great, but when it breaks, it's a nightmare. Both sides blame one another. Godot says Steam's the problem. Steam blames Godot, throws this generic error that it doesn't have more specific information. Prior Chuck made this massive overhaul to Godot Steam's multiplayer peer. It solved a lot of the issues we were facing, and I went ahead and updated the module, recompiled the engine, and pushed forward a patch. This ended up causing random crashes for clients due to some bad code. I had to learn a lot about C++, debugging, GDB, but eventually I fixed the problem and merged the changes back to the module, fixing it for everyone. Additionally, the change to the game's starting speed ended up being super divisive. The top tier players loved it and felt like it was closer to original Surf. The rest of the player base hated it, leaving negative reviews due to the game's increased difficulty. I had always imagined Surf's Up as having seasonal resets, so wiping times and changing the rules kind of just made sense to me. This time also coincided with AMD releasing a bad video driver that broke Vulkan for Godot. I was flooded with people complaining about issues that the game wasn't working properly. There was a fix to switch to DirectX 12, but it meant knowing about a launch parameter and going to the game's properties and being in the Discord. I should have been more proactive about making it a Steam launch option sooner. Top off these troublesome times. One of the game's top surfers came to me with some alarming news. All the top players were cheating. Now, I've dealt with cheaters before. With Survivalscape, the #1 player post-launch was completing runs with 200 HP. The game's hard-coded, so your health never goes above 100. We also had a hacker hit Surf's Up shortly after launch, taking world records with impossible times. We already had a basic anti-cheat implemented through the help of a popular game hacking Discord. I joined one day, hopped in voice, and asked if anyone was interested in hacking my game on Steam with the following conditions. They had to disclose their findings, and they had to stream their process. But when you have a leaderboard, people will do whatever they can to be at the top. Players had discovered that they can use a speed hack to slow down the game. The speed was just enough for the anti-cheat margins of error not to detect it. This allowed people to play at a slower pace, letting them have more time to maneuver and land the perfect board. A player showed this to me in a private Discord call and took a world record that would have been impossible to get. They then challenged me, saying, "Just you wait, this record will be gone by tomorrow." 30 minutes later, it was beat. I had a hacker problem, and it was impossible to tell which scores were legit and weren't. I ended up having to add to the anti-cheat, which took a couple weeks to figure out how to stop on this type of hack. Additionally, tattles on the players who were caught using it. This also meant I had to wipe all the times, which led to more negative reviews, bringing the game to a mixed rating on Steam. It had been a grueling couple months. I was depressed, frustrated, burnt out, now jobless, and relying on savings to survive. Towards the end of September, Karina came up with the idea that we really should do something for the holiday. We love Halloween. We love in-game events. She began working on a new Halloween-themed main menu. It features her mom as a cackling witch, and began working on her first map, Corn Maze. Nerdiful was improving our settings by removing the Godot Game Settings plugin, which we relied on. It was causing us some issues, like not being able to have multiple inputs bound to the same action. People wanted to have scroll wheel and space be their jump. Spanky and So from the community began working on Halloween-themed maps. I worked on some quality of life fixes and created a new, limited-time skeleton player model. Kind of got me out of my funk and back into the game's development. Our player count started going up. Reception was good from players. This led to Steam promoting the game during November, which greatly increased our player count. The game was back to having positive reviews on Steam. Reviews make and break your game. I find it very hard to not take the negative reviews personally. I try to remind myself that they aren't necessarily a direct attack at me, but the negative voices are often the loudest. Gamers will always find something to be upset or frustrated with, and they'll be sure to let you know by leaving a negative. I also use this website called SteamReviewAlert.com. It monitors my reviews and community discussions through emails. It's free for a single game and a one-time purchase of $20 to monitor 10 games. You also need to subscribe to your own community discussion forums on Steam. Get notified of every post and review, read them, interact with as many as possible. With Halloween out of the way, we began working on our Christmas update, which became version 1.3. I ended up rebuilding major aspects of the website to create an API for the game to fetch data from, as well as a way for us to fetch and manipulate data on Steam's backend. This allowed me to create a new global ranking for players, which was a feature a lot of people were asking for. But running the script for all 60,000 people took around 5 hours of my web server being at 100 CPU the entire time. I decided to make this a supporter-only feature, which allowed the script to complete in about 15 minutes and hopefully encourage people to pick up the DLC. We put the DLC on sale for most of December, and we added in 2 limited time drops, Santa and the Elf. We made a new main menu with Karina's dad voicing Santa, redesigned the map select, added 20 new maps, including a new indie game collab with Biathlon Challenge. We rewrote the input to handle input stacking or null binds, and we overhauled onboarding with new tutorial prompts and a guided surf mechanic that tries to strafe for you. The reception has been incredible. We had our first positive increase of player count in the game's history. So, what's next? We have a ton of ideas for features we'd like to implement and improve, such as Steam Workshop support for custom maps, modifiable user interfaces, a soundtrack, organizing a tournament, the list goes on. Currently, Nerdiful is working on a complete rewrite of our underlying systems. The core of the game is still based on that weekend prototype we started with that I just built on top of. There's a lot we can do to clean up the code base and make it easier for us to expand, which is what we want to focus on. Ideally, if all goes well, you won't really notice much of a difference. We're about 300 commits deep starting from November 3rd. My big task for the new year is to try to tackle monetization. While the original supporter idea was fair to the consumer, we're really not making enough money. Overall, we've only made about $6 per hour put into the game, which isn't even minimum wage in the US. I'm thinking of ideas like new cosmetics, microtransactions, or possibly trying to start a Patreon. During the last few months, I've continued discovering new ideas and prototyping them. I've made 8 games since July, and I'm really excited about them all. I made a friend slap style mini MMO, a multiplayer tower defense. I recreated Prop Hunt in Godot. I also recently released an open source multiplayer project called Cooties to teach people networking in Godot. It uses the same netcode that I use in SurfsUp, and it's meant to be a best practices demo for multiplayer. I plan on doing a video diving into the project's architecture soon. All these games are available for free to play on my itch.io over at bearlikelion.com. I'd love for you to try them out and tell me what you think. I'm also currently in the design phase of what might be my next game. I believe in this double diamond design model. I thrive in the discovery phase. It's my favorite part of development. You're exploring and expanding on a concept or idea. The possibilities are endless. You find the fun, and then you define what that fun is to further develop an idea. I'm currently defining my next game with a friend who's going to handle the art and music. It's really exciting, but it's also super difficult. This is currently the most work I've put into pre-production on a game so far, and I'm really hoping to start developing this idea the next year. So thank you. Thank you for taking this trip with me down memory lane. Thank you for checking out my games. Last year was a big one for me personally, and I'm super excited for 2026. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. If you want to hear more from me, please check out my socials. Thank you.